Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today marks the first video of a small series I'm working in regards to my personal master modes feedback. I plan on breaking down my feedback into small digestible videos rather than just a gigantic thesis that's 3 hours long. Just for people to understand my background in all of this, and if they're new to the channel, I'm one of those sweaty degenerate arena commander pilots, but I like to think my takes are broader than just the cockpit of a Gladius or another light fighter. Anyways, let's get this video off the pads. What do I want out of master modes? Number 1, fleet battles at scale. Now, if you watch my previous videos, then you probably know my background. On this channel, it's hardcore PvP through the cockpit of the light fighter. But it's surprisingly not why I backed Star Citizen. The reality is, which some of you may not like, but I'm actually here for the EVE Online 2.0, or the bigger picture if you will. I'm here for the future of huge battles at scale, the clashing of capital ships, and going head to head with other organizations. Even the logistics that comes with maintaining a fleet. Coming on now 6 years, I've done nothing but fly a handful of fighters, day to day seeking out small skirmishes, and if I'm lucky, finding a fight of the medium scale. But I'm ready for the game to go past just X-Wing vs TIE fighters. I'm ready for the light fighter meta to only be an aspect of the game rather than the entire game, and for that we need a balanced ecosystem where multiple ways to approach combat are both meta and competitive with one another. For this, the light fighter gameplay must be brought into line with the rest of the game. Heavy fighters, multi-crew, all the way to capitals, it's time for space combat to encompass and include all forms of combat competitively. It's time for things to get interesting, and the game to become what was promised, and not require us to pretend or roleplay that more than a handful of these ships are actually effective. Number 2. Team fights and battles to happen across immersive distances and not rely purely on UI elements to show the combat, but instead everything we've seen in the movies. For this, CIG needed to significantly arrest the number one culprit of this, drift without intent. By bringing these ship speeds forcefully down on players to operate in combat, we're finally starting to see what Combat Star Citizen was always planned to be. Flying between asteroids, stations, and true dogfighting in space. X-Wings up against TIE fighters, for example. Your teammates in the backdrop, and overall space battles happening around you as you fly through it. Finally, a truly immersive experience. Master Modes has without a doubt delivered that, but is it practical when it comes to the PU? A question we're yet to find out while limited to the squad battle experimental mode. Number 3. Out of combat nav mode limitations. Now here's where the community will truly be at contention, but it has to be said. How does the SCM pilots before combat catch the nav mode pilots? For example, a pirate quantum jumps into your organization's mining operation. If he's flying around at the speed ceiling of 1200 in nav mode, is he just running around doing loops without a care in the world? What is the mechanic to make him engageable? How is that dealt with? Can a player remain in nav mode for free and for a long duration? How does a fight even start? There are so many questions here, and I think it's going to be a real issue when it comes to the persistent universe. I know we can all guess how that will pan out, whether it's interdictions, missiles, or a web mechanic, but whatever the mechanic and the balancing of it, safe to say it's absolutely going to be one of the most important. In my eyes, the game is make or break in how these two modes interact. Number 4. A high skill ceiling and a low skill floor. Now, what does that mean exactly? Anyone who isn't familiar with the terminology, a high skill ceiling means it takes a truly long time to master flying in Star Citizen. A low skill ceiling in the aspect means someone could simply boot up the game, figure out the basic mechanics of the game, and be crushing veterans immediately. Games like this in the past, in my experience, have a very limited lifespan. When a game has true depth, or to refer to the earlier term, a high skill ceiling, from it branches so many great things. Education opportunities for content creation, the necessity to join organizations for their piloting programs, or open flight communities. All of that social interaction, player guides on flight, and more. From a high skill ceiling, multiple playstyles will battle it out for supremacy. Multiple approaches to flying and different methods will constantly go head to head to discover which is best. A journey the entire community will be put through. Games with depth survive the ages, but it's a double-edged sword, which is where the skill floor comes into play. We shouldn't all require climbing a mountain like Everest to learn spaceship combat, but it should be easy to begin your journey up the mountain. Ultimately, we need the game to be accessible. We need players to be able to play reasonably well without needing to commit a part-time job worth of hours into simply learning how to fly. Between all the ships available to us and all the ways to approach combat, whether it's missiles, repeaters, other weapon types, light fighters, multi-crew, turrets, and capital ships, there need to be options for the wider community to all participate and stand a chance. But in my opinion, after playing sophisticated and deep games in comparison to shallow games, a game truly becomes a hobby when there is depth in all things. A small caveat, I'd want the same floor and ceilings as described on all the aspects of the game. Mining, salvaging, to crafting, and so on. Ultimately, I want the journey of mastering flying in Star Citizen to be a long one, where I'm excited on which direction I'm going to take. It's worth noting also, the current live ceiling only exists in a handful of meta fighters, because the flight model is so restricted in other ship classes. Vanguards, Corsairs, Hammerhead pilots, Anvil F8 pilots have very low skill ceilings in comparison to light fighters. So it's important to know when the community is pushing for higher skill ceilings in their feedback, understand that they're, for the most part, referring to small to medium fighters. If you're not interested in sweating it out, fine. Fly other archetypes which don't have those depths, don't have that high of a ceiling, and still enjoy combat. Number 5. Finally, an attempt on game balance and variety. No more excuses. I entered the game at patch 3.4, where scouting opposing group squadron compositions was important to the outcome of the fight ahead. Preparing our counter with some of the toughest organizations in the game back then, where small snub fighters were hard countered by EMPs, Vandal heavy hitters were picked apart by live fighters, where coordinating fire with spooled up teammate EMPs were ways to take out opponents, where squadron composition was meta to include 5 to 6 different ships, rather than 2. Ever since that patch, any balance at all has been non-existent because in CIG's eyes, it's been a waste of resources. That argument was made 4 years ago. I've seen skyscrapers built in that time. Enough is enough. It's time for the ships we paid for to take their rightful place in space combat. The Drake ships, majority of Anvil, majority of Aegis, Crusader Origin, Vandal ships, and everything else alien in between. It's finally time for the ships to become interesting and useful. Usefulness through weapon types, actual decision making with ship loadouts and fleet compositions. With Master Mode's implementation, enough is enough. We've been shooting laser repeaters alone from less than a handful of light fighters for half a decade now. 5 long years, enough's enough. Number 6. Absolute control over our ships. With Master Modes, it's imperative we finally restore meaningful control to ships and the ability to arrest movement. To fly with intent. Over the last 5 years, I cannot count how many fights I've been at near Grimhags, for example, where once the fight is over, myself, often teammates or opponents, have accidentally managed to drift almost 300 kilometers away from the asteroid belt itself. Having to quantum jump to teammates in the middle of a fight because we've all lost our way. And it's important to note, it wasn't always just like this. In previous flight models, there were mechanics that kept combat speed slow, organically, that were disregarded for what we have today, ultimately needing to be fixed again by the implementation of Master Modes. But finally, with meaningful control, we're able to use stations and asteroids for line of sight against incoming fire. We can plan fights around terrain for advantage, and the environment will become an important aspect of the combat ahead. Number 7. Sticking to the design intent. A natural path, which I've learned from 4 different models in Star Citizen, is that the flight model handles when it's introduced, is nothing representative of how it will be handled 3 or 6 months down the line. Competitive playstyles will go head-to-head. The weak playstyles sink to the bottom, and the most competitive playstyles will rise to the top. Wiggling, backstrafing, resetting fights for shields, easy retreats, heavy jousting, abusing hit registration, the list, it never stops. Human beings in PvP specifically are going to push this model to its limits. My largest issue with the CIG development approach has always been the constant reinventing of the wheel. Once Master Modes is here, I don't want to wait for the next flight model to inevitably replace it. Instead, it's time for incremental fixes to unintended results of the design. As these issues become prevalent, I'm looking forward to them getting resolved as they are discovered, protecting the design intent. I'm hoping for incremental changes. There's plenty of flight models that have been lost to history in this game that could have been great gameplay had their issues been fixed without the need of reinventing the wheel. Number 8. Head tracking. Now this one is personal to me. For myself, peak Star Citizen is found in the immersion and controlling your camera using head tracking peripherals. It's the peak cockpit experience. But Master Modes dictates how useful this is. When a ship can rate, or in other words, pitch and yaw so easily, then the necessity to use head tracking diminishes. But with limited rating or pitch and yaw, the need to look into your planned turn increases. I can't express how cool this is, and it's very unique to just a handful of games. If the ship, however, can turn faster than the head tracking, then there's no need to it. If you haven't bought a head tracker already, buy one. Start looking into your turns as you make them, and tell me it isn't the coolest thing in gaming. In my opinion, my strong opinion, protect head tracking. Smart and balanced turn rates, please. If we can turn too easily and it's too accessible, it kills that necessity for head tracking. Keep in mind too, there is some camera options in the game options in regards to simulating head tracking without buying a device. Number 9, and my last point, which I truly think we can all appreciate here, fun for all playstyles. The flight model and Master Modes does not belong purely to the light fighter community. It doesn't belong purely to the arena commander community or the PvP community, but the entire Star Citizen community as a whole. Multi-crew races, PvE predominant players and PvP, light fighters, medium fighters, heavy fighters, and even heavier. Everyone needs their share, and at least every playstyle should be competitive with one another. Every option needs to be relatively viable. Not to say one of the options couldn't be pushed to a further limit or have an edge on another, but we don't want to see a ship archetype or size, combat gameplay loop sit dormant unused anymore. Nor do we want to see, for example, one ship archetype standing above all the rest. Combat can finally be competitive and welcoming for all the playstyles. So, in summary, I want, myself, meaningful fleet-scale battles of epic proportions, immersive surrounding experiences from the cockpit view, balance to reintroduce more ships to the competitive scene, meaningful control restored back to our ships, incremental game design, and competitiveness and fun for all types of combat. I welcome people to agree, and more importantly, I welcome you all to disagree with my feedback, because that's how we will all find a middle ground between everyone. I'm open to being wrong. I don't have all the answers, and we all just need to hash it out. Just speak up and be transparent with the position you are speaking from. Are you a new player with an initial impression? Are you a bitter veteran wanting what used to be? Are you interested in a competitive, fast-paced combat? Describe who you are, describe what you like and dislike, and go and type it in the feedback threads. The next video of this series, I'll break down on the specifics of what I think about Master Modes, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments. Fly safe or don't, and I'll catch you guys next time.